NieR Replicant version 1.2247 continued is, as Yoko Taro put it quite aptly, a version upgrade over 2010's original releases of NieR Replicant and its reskin NieR Gestalt. I never had the opportunity to play the original releases of this game back in the day, so this won't be some extensive comparison video or anything. What I can tell you about this version upgrade is that the graphics were overhauled with character designs and locations being improved, sometimes in large scale, sometimes not. Combat was reworked to more closely resemble that of NieR Automata's. Some bells and whistles like lighting effects were dramatically improved, some content was restored, and new content was added to help make the series a little more cohesive. Otherwise, for better or worse, much of this game remains just as its original release had intended. My review from here on out will function like all my others, albeit with a slightly reworked formula for this episode. And like all my others, I'd still like to start with the story. But before I do that, if you like what you see around here, make sure to hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe to see more. Now let's get into it.
For the last time, my name is Grimoire Weiss, and it is not to be abbreviated.
なんだこれ。誰かヨナを助けてください。誰か。
This hack and slash game has a story that largely defies the ability to be condensed in a formatted review like this, as much of the story really revolves around the lore and secrets our player character uncovers over the course of their adventure. Secrets I will do my utmost to leave unspoiled. Because of this, boiling the plot down to what I can tell you may sound a little lackluster, but that couldn't be further from the truth. In essence, we play as a player-nameable character to which I stuck with the familiar moniker NieR. NieR's younger sister Yona has been afflicted with a mysterious illness known as the Black Scrawl, an illness which makes her weak and in need of frequent rest and medication. As such, NieR takes it upon himself to take care of her. He'll search high and low across the post-apocalyptic world for any sign of a cure. The world of NieR is one of waste. The humans who thrived and populated the planet 1,000 years earlier have been driven to the brink. The civilization they once built lies as scattered hunks of overgrown scraps, decorating the yawning vistas of the northern plains, the defunct factories of the junkyard, and the horizon's view from the shores of seafront. What life still flourishes here exists in small numbers, scattered to the corners of the world, developing their own new cultures and commerce, and trying their best to survive against the rising tide of enemy advances who come in the form of the Shades. The Shades are one of NieR Replicant's many persistent mysteries. Not much is known of these ambivalent creatures, but their ties to the Black Scrawl and the fabled inscrutable Shadow Lord, the one believed to be the cause of all manner of Earth's problems, are implied. Along the way, NieR will find a small handful of companions to share in his journey, and every single one of them, as well as their dynamics with each other, are great. Kaine, as the game puts it, is both delicate and fierce, like a teacup that survived a shipwreck. She is a foul-mouthed badass who has clearly been through a lot. Though independent to a fault, she is an indispensable member of the team. Emile is a young, sweet, innocent, and somewhat cursed child who was never exactly given the best chances in life. He tries his best to hold others up, despite historically never being given the same care. Also, he's just cute as a button, like, look at him. What are you doing, Emile? Stop it, it's too cute, I can't handle it. These two characters in particular share something of a common theme. Because of their bodies, both struggle to find their place in the world, and the world does its best to make them feel like they don't belong. However, each of them internalizes and acts upon this struggle in their own way. Our final traveling companion is the esteemed Grimoire Weiss. He's a book. In his quest to save his sister, Brother NieR— Alright, I get it. I won't do Weiss dirty like that. Weiss is a book, but remarkably, he's a book with a lot of character. He's a little gruff and a little debonair, though he's also known to take himself a little too seriously. But he's also the strongest guide and voice of reason Brother NieR has when he's out and about. He's somebody with knowledge and a good head on his well, he's somebody with a good head, I guess. Anyway, in his quest to save his sister, Brother NieR will find himself hacking and slashing through hordes of robots and shades. And the combat, I'm happy to say, is pretty smooth. With this version upgrade, they sought to make the combat more like Automata's, and they definitely succeeded. However, for obvious reasons, certain facets of Automata were cut out. Though combat is lighter mechanically, it still does the job well enough to a point. We have two dedicated physical attack buttons which can be chained together or held down for larger attacks. You can block, or by timing your block well, parry the enemy attacks, granting yourself a small window of slowdown. You can sidestep around or dodge the enemy's attacks, or if you like, use your dodge as a faster means of travel. Combos translate well in the air as well, and can even be used to extend jump distance. You have 2 dedicated magic buttons, and what each one does is up to you. There are 3 core weapon types that will determine your combat style. These weapons can be switched between mid-combo, or replaced on the fly with a handy quick menu. The 3 weapon categories are swords, bigger swords, and polearms. I found myself using the polearms class more than anything, which before the end seemed rather OP, as it holds the weapons with the highest base DPS and longest range. You gain strength throughout the journey through a traditional XP leveling system, but also by collecting words typically dropped by enemies in battle. You can equip up to 2 words to any weapon or ability, and they will modify its base stats or grant it special effects. This isn't a deep system, and it's not something you'll need to look into often, but it can change combat quite a bit. The dungeons kinda follow a similar philosophy. Some dungeons are straightforward shoot for the exit types, while others will have you fighting waves of enemies to escape the room and progress. Others still are somewhat charmingly dated, in that they require you to follow ridiculous rules that change from room to room. Other dungeons aren't really dungeons so much as they are novels. Either way, it's an interesting mixture of ideas, and I found the variety really helped in the journey. For the most part, combat is rather satisfactory and a lot of fun. Unfortunately, however, with how I played, balance fell apart such that before I reached the end of Route A, of which there are 5 routes, I was already so powerful the bosses were hardly doing any damage. Note, of course, like usual, for purpose of review, I played on standard difficulty. So take that into account here when you decide what you would like to play the game on for yourself. Though I personally would have liked more challenge in the end game, being massively OP during the alternate routes was something I absolutely celebrated, as the game can tend to get rather tedious here. Alternate routes in the game have you replaying the same content and story chunks a lot, often with little to no difference. A single run through Route A should really only take about 15 hours if you beeline the content. Each subsequent route, excluding Route E, requires you to play through less content than the route that preceded it, though the split between new content and replayed content in each route varies greatly. To my best estimation, there's roughly 19 and a half hours of unique main story content. To see all 19 and a half hours requires you to experience this story content for about 31 hours. Having said that, you might be wondering why my playthrough took 40. I don't know if it's just me, but like, this couch just hasn't exactly been all that comfortable recently. Like, exactly how recently? If I had to ballpark a guess, probably since April 22nd, 2010. Wonder where all the padding went. While repeating the same story beats and skipping familiar cutscenes on alternate routes was tedious padding at best, it actually gets a little bit worse. See, in order to unlock endings C and D and subsequently E, you have to acquire every weapon in the game. An ending requirement that's arbitrary at best and seems to have no real place in how events actually unfold. Some of these weapons are side quest rewards. Some are found, some are given, and the rest are bought. Sadly, the economy in this game is not friendly, so the best way to acquire the money you need is to complete more side quests. While some of these side quests offer interesting little parables that reinforce various themes of the game and deepen your understanding of how the world works, many of them are simply just not good. A lot of the quests boil down to simple gathering quests that require a lot of material grinding, crappy delivery quests, or the occasional decent, unique monster hunting quest. But ultimately, there is no way around it. You will end up doing a lot of bad side quests, and a lot of back and forth time wasting. Knowing early on what the ending requirements would be, I decided to get as many weapons as I could on my A route. This took what should have been a 15 to 20 hour route to roughly 28 hours. But my main train of thought was pretty simple on this one. If I'm going to dramatically hinder the pace of the game, I'd rather it be up front. At least that way the tedium from replaying story chunks on the alternate routes won't be exacerbated. NieR Replicant makes it very clear it does not give a shit about the average player. And for the most part, I kinda dig that. Like, hell yeah, stop my game for a few hours so I can read your novel. Make me follow behind the world's slowest guide for a figuratively literal century. She's cute as hell anyway, I love this. Make me fish. Actually, you know what? Don't. Fishing sucks in this game. And so does the gardening, but not because it's comedically unintuitive, I kinda like that part. Because the RNG for growing what you want is so cruel that save scumming and time zone manipulation seems intended. But otherwise, please, load me up with your charming archaic bullshit. I kinda like it. But please, do not make me go through so much of the same shit so many times. As Lenoge would say in Stephen King's Storm of the Century, hell is repetition, and this was simply too much of it. Tedious as this was though, and it really was tedious, you may be wondering if it's worth getting those alternate routes. And the simple answer is, like, what are you fucking stupid? I mean, of course it is. There's no question about it. I wish they did it differently, but it is worth it. See, Yoko Taro has a certain style to his storytelling and a motif that seems to repeat in many of his games. His games are often an experiment in context and morality. He once remarked that people often believe they are correct or just in their actions only because they lack perspective. What we see as right is only ever based on what we know, and most times we know very little. So as it is with NieR Replicant, just as it was with Automata, though we may feel convinced of our actions on our A routes, these subsequent routes provide context that may show us there was much more to be considered. These alternate routes also delve deeper into our non-player character party members and give them backstories and development arcs that make them and this game absolutely unforgettable.
Lots of pain.
These are not things to be missed. You haven't truly experienced NieR Replicant if you've only rolled the credits once. So I implore you, don't just stop at the end of Route A. Since I mentioned the characters again, let's go off on a brief tangent, as a comment on the voice acting is well overdue. So when I first started my adventure, I had the game in English. However, young Yona in the prologue really wasn't sitting right with me. So I switched back to Japanese and started over. While I liked this voice acting better, another issue started to occur. An issue you won't feel if you don't understand any Japanese at all, but if you understand even a little...
大丈夫かヨナ
Instances like this are very common and rather jarring. However, I put up with it until shortly after meeting Kaine. In her Japanese tracks, they made the creative decision to bleep out her foul language. Problem here is that those bleeps often don't align with the translated subtitles.
その臭い口でもう二度と喋れないように
At this point, the juxtaposition was simply too jarring. Thankfully, switching back to English was not a hard decision to settle with. Laura Bailey does an excellent job voicing Kaine, and they did not bleep the English language at all. Vice, though a little more gruff in Japanese, is voiced in English by one of my favorite voice actors, Liam O'Brien, whom I came to love for his portrayal of War in the Darksiders series. Emile is tenderly treated by Julie Ann Taylor, who, while she does a great job, I actually couldn't stop hearing as Carol from Tales of Vesperia, so now you all have to live with that too.
And this is a guild job as well. Don't forget, all for the guild.
I'm scared.
And one more note here, though he didn't have a large role, hearing Brad Venable as the voice of the Red Bag Man after his passing this last January was a very bittersweet experience. Aside from the rare instance here and there though, I was very happy with the performances in this game in either language. In general, the technical aspects of this game are very well realized. The writing is fun and interesting, the performance on PS4 is rather solid, the control feels tight, the music, largely provided once again by Keiichi Okabe, is emblematic of the series, with the vocals in a made-up language lovingly delivered by Emmy Evans. All around, this is just a solid audio-visual experience. And that's about all I can really touch on in the run of this review. But I would like to close this video on one more thought, a thought that I dared to have and I kinda needed to include, even at the cost of screwing up this entire video's format. People will often talk about how bleak the story of NieR Replicant is and how nihilistic it all is. But at the end of it all, I don't really think it was all that nihilistic. It's gonna be tough to dance around the spoilers to make this as clear as I would like it to be, but the way that I interpreted the subtext, I actually felt like this game had something quite optimistic to take from it. So here's how I felt on that. Hope never dies while the inherent traits of humanity live on. That is what I ultimately got from this experience. Every piece of media, of course, is open to interpretation and psychological semiotic analysis, and I'm not going to say other interpretations are wrong. If somebody feels this game is hopelessly nihilistic, that's just fine, but I got something else from my time with NieR Replicant, something much more optimistic. It's true, over the course of our adventure, things get pretty dark. Even a lot of the side quests tend to end in rather sudden, sometimes even hilariously bleak deaths. But these deaths aren't absent of response or reaction. They aren't meaningless. Each one has a message to convey or a relationship or reaction for us as the players to observe. It's through the game's traumatic and harrowing experiences that fundamental truths about humanity and the relationships we build with one another are laid out. Even in a world where all seems hopeless or at times even pointless, one truth still shines through. The truth that it is not the tangible shape of our bodies or the abstract concept of a soul that defines our humanity, nor is it the age we live in, the things we must do, or the conditions we must live with, but rather it is the shape of our feelings, our relationships, our actions, and the realms of our influence that define us. This facet of humanity is transcendent and universal, and its presentation as an ever-enduring human trait that survives through the countless hardships seen all throughout the game reinforces to me the idea that hope is never truly lost, while our humanity is not. Every life that carries these traits carries hope. No matter how different that life looks or feels, their value and influence is immeasurable. Hope never dies, while the inherent traits of humanity live on. Something to remember even in the darkest of moments. It's not over yet. Well, hopefully that made sense to you guys. I'm guessing it's gonna make more sense to the people who have already beaten the game, but even the ones that didn't, just know that I guess even in the bleakest of things, I do tend to find something of a silver lining. Unless it's the movie The Lodge. I don't know if that movie had anything positive to say. Anyway, as always, folks, thanks for watching.